new video now from inside the Coweta County Jail, where a nurse has been arrested for sneaking drugs into the facility.
May 26th, 2022. Shanika LaChantre Roberts, a nurse at the Coweta County Jail, was going about her usual duties when she decides to do something shocking on camera. While the authorities noticed, little did they know that more disturbing details would soon be uncovered. These are nurses who forgot there were cameras in prison.
Collapsing, throwing up, and begging for his life, saying he cannot breathe. Shows video of an Atlanta man just hours before he died while in police custody, with nurses standing by.
Before stepping into the role of a nurse at the Cobb County Adult Detention Center, Annalene Visser built a career grounded in healthcare and leadership. She rose to the position of nursing supervisor after years of medical training and experience, earning the trust of her employers to oversee inmates' health needs. Now, while her background suggested dedication to patient care, what actually happened in 2019 in prison tells a different story, one that led to outrage and national scrutiny. September 2019, Kevil Wingo, a 36-year-old father of three, was booked into Cobb County Jail on drug possession. Days into his detainment, Wingo complains of severe abdominal pain. Security cameras capture him collapsing multiple times, visibly sweating, groaning, and crawling across the floor in agony. His condition was so severe that a deputy wheeled him into the jail's infirmary, seeking urgent attention from the medical staff. Many staff members recognized the gravity of Wingo's condition. Nurse Natalie Chance called the infirmary to report that Wingo was screaming and sweating, clearly suffering from abdominal pain. She stated plainly,
"You could tell there was something wrong with him because like the sweats and stuff was just like something can't fake."
Another staffer, Tiffany Womack, a lab technician and trained emergency medical technician, would also attempt to step in. She wants to find out about heart rate and blood pressure, but her request is denied by the one person in charge, Nurse Annalene Visser. Visser repeatedly dismissed Wingo's symptoms, suggesting that he was faking his pain to be transferred to a hospital. She brushed it all off as the show of the day, insisting that Wingo wasn't in medical crisis. Despite other staffers' concerns and visible evidence from surveillance footage, she did not allow Wingo to receive even the most basic medical check. According to her later testimony, it would have taken her no more than 5 minutes to just check his vitals, but she refused, stating Wingo was being too rowdy. Jail cameras even caught her looking into Wingo in his cell as he was groaning in pain. After growing tired of Wingo's cries for help, Visser instructed deputies to place him in this isolation room. Moments later, he collapsed and never came out alive. Jail staff eventually found him unresponsive. The official autopsy would show that he died from a perforated ulcer. That condition allowed stomach acid to leak into his abdominal cavity, causing that extreme pain and a slow, preventable death. Toxicology confirmed that there were no drugs in his system at the time. Wingo's death led to outrage amongst his family and former jail staff. His daughter Kiara just doesn't understand how a trained nurse could ignore such obvious signs of distress. She doesn't want Visser to ever be allowed to practice again.
She don't know because she never checked, but she don't know because she never did what she was supposed to do. They would have just did that job, we wouldn't be here.
Shortly after, a complaint was filed with the Georgia Board of Nursing, urging them to revoke Visser's license. The investigation would drag on for years. In June 2023, a judge recommended that Visser receive only 1 year of probation for her role in Wingo's death. The nursing board accepted the recommendation, allowing Visser to keep her license and continue practicing medicine. That decision came despite clear evidence, recorded testimony, and security video really showing critical failure in patient care. As part of a pending lawsuit now against the Cobb County Sheriff's Office, Visser gave a video-recorded deposition in May. She had already been fired and had no former ties. In her testimony, Visser defended her choices and showed no remorse. Even after knowing the cause of death, she claimed Wingo had been pretending, saying,
"I think he was acting out. all along he was acting out, wanting to go to the hospital. And they'll do anything to go. And he would do anything to go, even if it means picking him off the floor.
Even with everything in hindsight, she still wouldn't change not a single decision she made that day. Her statements had shocked healthcare professionals. Elaine Harris, a former nursing professor with over 40 years of experience, reviewed that deposition and was stunned. She said there was a serious problem with the board not understanding the seriousness of Visser's failure.
They would have seen this nurse's utter lack of compassion, her utter lack of care. I can't envision her in any other practice setting and being considered a safe practitioner.
According to Harris, had Wingo's vitals been checked, his dangerously low blood pressure and elevated heart rate would have made his medical emergency obvious. She believed the inmate could have survived with timely intervention. Sheriff's investigators disputed Visser's claims that Wingo was disruptive. After seeing the footage, they said that they didn't see him acting out or even faking symptoms. Investigator Cody Driscoll told Visser directly,
"We've seen the video, and I have yet to see him throughout the video acting out at all."
Despite the findings, the aftermath of Wingo's death did not include any criminal charges against Visser. All the Wingo family could do was try to reach a financial settlement with the jail's former medical provider, and afterwards, no further arrests were made in connection with that incident. The Cobb County Sheriff's Office, under new leadership since 2021, also publicly stated that they bear no responsibility for Wingo's death, which did occur under a previous administration. Brittany Danae Johnson, a licensed vocational nurse, worked at the Bi-State Justice Center in Texarkana, Texas, where she was responsible for the medical care of inmates in custody. Now, she had no criminal background before she was hired to work at this privately operated facility managed by LaSalle Corrections. They trusted her to watch over patients with serious health conditions, including those placed under medical observation. However, what cameras are about to catch would lead to a criminal investigation, a civil rights lawsuit, and a sentence that would put Johnson on the other side of the bars she once worked behind. June 28, 2016, Morgan Angerbauer, a young woman from Arkansas, was arrested on a probation violation related to a prior drug charge. Now, she's booked at the Bi-State Justice Center and immediately informs jail staff that she has type 1 diabetes, a chronic condition that requires constant monitoring and insulin. So due to the seriousness of that condition, she's placed in a medical observation cell. From the beginning, her blood sugar is dangerously high. In fact, the jail's glucose meter couldn't even register a number. Now, initially, she was given 15 units of insulin, but over the following days, her condition remained unstable. June 30th, 2016, her condition hasn't improved. Her glucose was fluctuating at unsafe levels. That evening, sometime around 5 p.m., she's asking Brittany Johnson, the nurse on duty, to test her blood sugar again. Johnson refused. According to official reports, Johnson tells the inmate that
it doesn't work like that
and dismissed the request, claiming that inmates didn't decide when they received medical care. Over the next several hours, surveillance captures Angerbauer repeatedly banging on the door of her cell, shouting for help and pleading to have her blood sugar checked. Johnson continues to deny her care. By early morning of July 1st, 2016, Angerbauer had collapsed on the floor of her cell, vomiting and unresponsive. It's at this point other inmates and jail staff actually notice her condition and call for help. Brittany Johnson finally responds and attempts to perform a glucose test, and the result reads E3, meaning glucose level was so high it's beyond the machine's range. However, instead of giving insulin, Johnson makes a fatal mistake and administers glucose, which only raises Angerbauer's blood sugar further. ER services aren't called until more than 40 minutes after the initial signs of unconsciousness, and by the time they do get there, Angerbauer's dead. The autopsy confirms her cause of death as diabetic ketoacidosis, with a blood sugar level of 813 mg/dL, more than 7 times the normal upper limit. What sealed this case wouldn't be testimony nor medical evidence. It's that footage. Jail security cameras captured the entire sequence of events. Angerbauer's repeated calls for help, her visible suffering, and Johnson's lack of response, even though her station is about 20 feet away. August 5th, 2016. Texarkana police launched this full investigation. Johnson's arrested and charged with negligent homicide, a misdemeanor under Arkansas law. Now, the arrest is based on a clear sign of neglect and medical findings that confirm the death could have been prevented with timely care. In early 2017, Johnson initially pleads not guilty at her first hearing. Prosecutors later elevate the charge to felony manslaughter, citing the severity and avoidability of Angerbauer's death. A trial date is scheduled for November 27, 2017. However, to spare the family the trauma of reliving those events in court, a plea agreement was reached. On the same day, Johnson changes her plea deal to guilty on the original misdemeanor negligent homicide charge. Judge Kirk Johnson gives her 6 months in the Miller County Jail, with 90 days of that sentence suspended. She's taken into custody immediately after the hearing, and in the end she serves about 3 months behind bars. So in addition to the prison sentence, Johnson's nursing license was suspended by the Texas Board of Nursing. According to records, she's barred from reapplying for at least a year. Jennifer Hauser, Morgan Angerbauer's mother, delivered this heart-wrenching victim impact statement during sentencing. She spoke about watching the video and seeing her daughter screaming for help and dying on the floor of her cell in her own vomit. She tells the court that Johnson had the power to save her daughter and chose not to act. The consequences of this wouldn't end with Johnson's sentence. In September 2016, Hauser filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Johnson, LaSalle Corrections, the private company that operates the bi-state facility, and several other staff members. The suit alleges that Angerbauer's constitutional rights were violated due to medical negligence and deliberate indifference to her condition. However, LaSalle Corrections attempted to dismiss the suit. They hold no responsibility, pointing to Angerbauer's own drug use and lack of transparency about her medical history. But in the end, the court rejected the motion, stating that the facts needed to be determined at trial. And as a result, the lawsuit was settled for $200,000 in December 2017.
There is growing outrage today over the death of an inmate in a New York State prison who was brutally beaten by more than a dozen correction officers.
December 9th, 2024, 2 nurses at Marcy Correctional Facility, Kyle Dashnaw and Abedin Mehmetovich, were involved in a disturbing case of an assault on an inmate. Now on this day, 43-year-old Robert Brooks is taken from Mohawk Correctional to Marcy. Brooks had been incarcerated since 2017, serving a 12-year sentence for first-degree assault. This routine transfer becomes the start of a deadly chain of events. Shortly after his arrival, Brooks is escorted to the infirmary, already handcuffed and restrained. Surveillance footage and body-worn cameras later released by the Attorney General's office shows him being placed on this medical examination table. Now this night, multiple COs, including Christopher Walrath, surround him. The officers punch Brooks in the face, chest, and groin, kick him, and then hoist him up by his neck before slamming him back on the table. According to records, Dashnaw and Mehmetovich stood at the edge of that room, watching while the assault took place, without attempting to stop these officers or even render aid afterward. Despite the medical training and legal obligation to act, they stay silent. Investigators later found out that the health worker also didn't report that incident in her nursing log, omitting any mention of injuries, trauma, or abuse. When first questioned, Dashnaw and Mehmetovich denied witnessing the attack, believing they wouldn't be held accountable since they weren't directly involved. They also assumed there wasn't clear audio or video, mistakenly thinking that the victim had been in the center of the room. But the cameras were running. Now, while the officers failed to activate those body cams manually, the devices were still in standby mode, silently recording without audio. December 10th, 2024, Robert Brooks died in a nearby hospital. Autopsy shows asphyxia due to neck compression and blunt force trauma. his death was ruled a homicide. And the following week, Governor Kathy Hochul condemned the incident and ordered immediate action. 13 staff members, including Dashna and Mehmetovich, were suspended without pay. That's not all, though. Another officer resigns the next day. And then we have the nurse and 2 sergeants charged with manslaughter for failing to intervene, while Super CO Walrath and 5 others are charged with second-degree murder. May 2025, Walrath pleads guilty to first-degree manslaughter and admits that he left his post to participate in the beating, placed Brooks in a chokehold, and struck him multiple times. That plea agreement reduced a potential life to 15 years. Now, Dashna and Mehmetovich haven't entered a plea deal yet, but prosecutors confirmed that they're facing formal charges and disciplinary action. The Attorney General said that they failed to document the attack and withheld information during the internal review. Legal experts say that though the nurse's case was different in nature from the officers', it was equally severe due to their position as licensed medical providers. Although officials haven't yet provided a clear reason for Brooks's transfer to Marcy just before his death, his family, who have since filed a civil rights lawsuit, claim that Brooks was targeted without provocation. As of now, the investigation remains ongoing, with the case of the nurse being a major one. In February 2025, it was revealed that Kyle Dashna, Abedin Mehmetovich, as well as a third nurse, Patricia Matos, would not face criminal charges, despite Brooks dying after 3 separate beatings at that correctional facility. And that's because the nurses were told by the prison guards to remain out of that ER during the beating. However, Dashna and Mehmetovich, the 2 nurses briefly seen on that video during the incident, are still facing civil lawsuits. The suit claims they ignored Brooks's urgent medical needs and had a clear duty to step in during that assault, but didn't. In response, the DOC has updated its policies. Now, body cams must be turned on during all inmate interactions. Violations have to be reported immediately, and any failure to do so will result in disciplinary action.
New video now from inside the Coweta County Jail, where a nurse has been arrested for sneaking drugs into the facility.
Shanika LaChantre Roberts was once a caregiver, someone trusted to help heal others. Born and raised in Georgia, she had a relatively quiet upbringing. Friends from school remembered her as kind and ambitious. After completing her studies, she became a licensed practical nurse, dedicating her career to healthcare. Not long after, she secures her first job at Coweta County Jail, where she served for 3 years. It's a job that combines her medical training with a sense of responsibility and order. But in May 2022, that good image would be destroyed, all captured on camera. May 26, 2022. Surveillance from inside the jail shows Roberts at a counter, speaking with an inmate. At first glance, it looks like a typical nurse-inmate interaction, but investigators already tipped off to suspicious activity reviewed that footage a little closer. What they saw changed everything. In this video, the inmate, later identified as Kenneth Fears, reaches into the pocket of Roberts' medical scrubs and retrieves an item. He then discreetly drops it down in front of his jail jumpsuit. The movement is subtle, but to trained eyes, it's a breach of protocol and likely criminal activity. Deputies quickly act. They locked down the jail pod where the inmate's cell was located and conducted a thorough search. A canine's brought in to assist. The results are alarming. Inside the cell, we have all kinds of contraband, drugs, and other prohibited items. The seized materials include suspected marijuana, methamphetamine, fentanyl, non-controlled substance pills, and suspected tobacco, loosely wrapped cigarettes, gambling paraphernalia, and even a handmade shank. It was clear that something more terrible was happening in this place. June 2nd, 2022, Roberts is officially arrested. She's charged with possession of marijuana with intent to distribute and crossing the guard line with contraband, which are both felony offenses. The sheriff's office emphasizes that the changes were only related to marijuana at the time, but with the presence of multiple controlled substances and evidence pointing to organized smuggling, additional charges were anticipated. However, the consequences of Roberts' actions weren't limited to her alone. As the investigation expands, so does the list of those implicated. By June 10, 2022, 6 more people are found arrested in connection to the smuggling ring. Among them, we have Antonio Carter, Raphael Kirkland, Rashad Houston, and Hunter McDonald, all inmates serving time at this facility. Kenneth Fears, the star of the video, was also charged. Additionally, 35-year-old Renita Leonard was arrested and charged with conspiracy to cross the guard line with contraband, conspiracy to possess marijuana with intent to distribute, and use of a telecommunications device to commit a crime. The investigation showed this network that went beyond a single nurse and an inmate. Authorities found a whole trafficking ring of drugs and contraband throughout the jail. And aside from that, investigators would have to assume there are operators outside of the prison bringing the drugs in. So, with more arrests to be expected, deputies stated that the full scope of the operation is still under review. Sheriff's investigator Toby Nix made it clear that the Coweta County Sheriff's Office had zero tolerance for illegal behavior, especially inside a correctional facility. Smuggling drugs and weapons into a jail creates a lot of problems. Now, what's especially disturbing here is that a medical professional entrusted with care had turned into a link in a dangerous chain. Shanika Roberts, once a helper and protector, now faces the possibility of some serious prison time. As of now, she has some felony drug offenses, and investigators haven't ruled out filing more charges against her. However, for Kenneth Fears and the others, additional charges mean extended sentences and, as you might have guessed, more legal trouble.
A Cumberland County detention center nurse is charged with committing acts with an inmate.
32-year-old Jean Rodriguez worked here as a licensed practical nurse for Cumberland County Detention Center, and now she's locked up.
2022. Jean Rodriguez relocates to North Carolina from Florida and settled in Hope Mills with her husband and his family. Rodriguez had a clean background with no prior criminal record before working at Cumberland County Detention Center. She was hired as a licensed practical nurse at this correctional facility under a contract with Southern Health Partners, the company responsible for medical staffing at the jail. Now, in this role, she has to provide basic medical care to detainees and is expected to maintain a professional boundary at all times. But she's soon about to find herself at the center of a scandal. April 5th, 2023. Jean, caught on surveillance footage, having some fun with a male inmate. Now, the acts are recorded in a restricted area of the jail, and were considered so explicit that the footage hasn't been released to the public. Investigators said that the relationship between Rodriguez and this inmate began in January 2023, months before any reports were filed. The video showed repeated encounters between the two, violating all kinds of jail policies and state laws. One of the most concerning clips would capture Rodriguez performing this unorthodox oral examination on the inmate during her scheduled medical rounds. This all happened in private rooms, where routine care should have been provided. Now, she knew what she was doing. She liked being wrong, and she was about to face some consequences. Now, it all goes down when a coworker notices some signs of inappropriate behavior. So this coworker reports her to admin, which then leads to an internal review and ultimately triggers a criminal investigation. Once the sheriff's office knew about it, detectives are going through hours of security footage, uncovering multiple incidents between Rodriguez and the inmate on January 24th, February 14th, March 20th, March 24th, and April 3rd. The content of this footage was flagged as highly inappropriate for public release, and nobody was allowed to see it because of its graphic nature. Shortly after this discovery, they raided the inmate's cell. Deputies find all kinds of contraband, nude photographs believed to be that of Rodriguez, various controlled substances, suspected tobacco, and a handmade weapon. Among the drugs we have methamphetamine, fentanyl, and marijuana. Now, investigators couldn't directly link Rodriguez to the contraband. Officials have stated that she hasn't been charged in connection with any kind of drugs or weapons. But investigations are still ongoing, and more evidence is being reviewed. May 11th, 2023, Rodriguez is arrested at her house in Hope Mills. and charged with 5 felony counts of sexual acts by a custodian. Each charge carries a potential sentence of up to 88 months. The following day, she appears in court, where her bond is set at $250,000. Now in court, Rodriguez kind of asked the judge to lower her bond, saying that her father was in poor health and claimed that she had no prior offenses, but the judge denied that request, saying that she should have thought about that before. The same day, the judge would sign a safekeeping order and sent Rodriguez to Harnett County Jail for her protection. The court felt her situation created a clear need for added security. All the inmates involved in the case remain anonymous. Court documents confirm that this guy was 33 years old, and he tells investigators the sexual acts happened, though he claimed they were all consensual. But in North Carolina, any contact between jail staff and inmates is illegal, regardless of consent. As of now, the inmate hasn't been charged for sexual activity. However, he might face some discipline for that contraband that was found. Aside from that, the sheriff's office hasn't ruled out any additional charges for Rodriguez nor the inmate, as the investigation, like we said, continues. The case is active, and officials are urging anyone with further information to please contact the Major Crimes Investigation Unit. They believe others might be involved, and more details are about to surface pretty soon. And here we have Sarah Kachich, who grew up in Kilmarnock, pursuing a career in nursing. Before becoming a criminal, she worked in healthcare as a drug and alcohol recovery practitioner, helping patients struggle with addiction. Anybody who knew Sarah never saw any of this coming. You see, she was known for her professional demeanor and secured a role at HMP Manchester. However, behind the scenes, she had a relationship with a prisoner that would lead to a complete breakdown of trust, both professionally and legally. What started as a job focused on inmate rehabilitation slowly turned into a serious breach of the very rules she was hired to enforce. 2022, 31-year-old Sarah Kachich forms a relationship with 29-year-old inmate Qasim Ahmed while working at HMP Manchester. Now, in this relationship, she would bring him all kinds of illegal items into the prison. On many occasions, she hid cannabis, ketamine, cocaine, and tobacco in her bra, bypassing security and delivering them to Ahmed. April 22, 2022. Ahmed's release is coming up in a few months, but he's caught with a mobile phone inside his cell. During a routine search, COs find a phone and a memory stick. That raised suspicions. An internal investigation soon follows, and as a result, authorities start watching staff movements and communication more closely, which soon lead them to Kachich. Security footage picks up irregular patterns in her behavior, including time spent in restricted areas and consistent contact with Ahmed. While the exact footage was never released to the public due to legal and privacy concerns, the recordings did play a key role in building the case against her. By August 10, 2022, Kachich is arrested at HMP Manchester. When officers search her, they find cannabis, ketamine, cocaine, and tobacco stuffed in her bra. Oh, and a condom with cannabis as well. A further search would reveal a smell-proof bag in her drawer filled with a significant amount of cannabis, steroid tablets, and tobacco. Then they went and searched her house and found a large sum of cash, multiple mobile phones, and several SIM cards. Despite how damaging this evidence was, she was released on bail soon after. And her run-ins with the law wouldn't stop here. December 2, 2022, shortly after Ahmed had been released on license from HMP Forest Bank, police arrived at his home address in Bury. The cops saw Ahmed fleeing from the driver's seat of a Porsche Macan registered to Kachich, who was also in the passenger seat. Both of them are then arrested and then returned to prison. Then they find out that Kachich had applied for vehicle financing using false information. When questioned, she refused to provide any PIN for her phone, and for that she was later charged with failing to comply with a Section 49 notice, which requires people to grant access to encrypted devices when ordered. So she provided the PIN, and then they found over 3,000 messages between her and Ahmed, confirming the depth of her relationship and the extent of their coordination. The investigation, led by Northwest Regional Organized Crime Unit, the HMPPS National Counter-Corruption Unit, and officials at HMP Manchester, uncovered the full scale of her misconduct. January 23, 2025, Sarah Kachich stands before the court and pleads guilty to several charges, like misconduct in a public office, conveying Class A, B, and C drugs into a prison, fraud by false representation, and failing to comply with a Section 49 notice. Kachich is ultimately sentenced to 2 years in prison. As for Qasim Ahmed, he also pled guilty to aiding and abetting misconduct in a public office and to possession of List B articles, including mobile phones, SIM cards, and a USB stick. Just like her, he gets a 2-year sentence too. Detective Constable Brian Johnston of the Northwest Regional Organized Crime Unit emphasized the severity of the situation. He said that the actions of Miss Sarah over here compromised the security of the prison and enabled illegal activity within its walls. He stresses the importance of continuing to investigate such breaches and holding those responsible accountable.